the Rani of Jhansi, she's one of those stories that everyone knows and no one knows. Because in some ways we all know that during the rebellion of 1857, she fought in battle, she led her army against the British, she died in battle, and yet we seem to think that that's the whole story. But of course it's far more complicated. Rani Lakshmibai was born an ordinary girl. So in many ways, there was no reason to record her life. There was no reason to really pay attention to her till she became famous in the rebellion of 1857. And when you ask the question about how is she depicted, I think for me it's less important how she is depicted than what is more important is what is the reason behind her depiction. For those who were nationalists or, committed to the cause of India being independent from the East India Company and the British, she was, in many ways a kind of a goddess of independence. As the famous poem by Subhadra Kumari Chauhan puts it, Swatantrata ki Devi. But for the British, she was in some ways a marker of their greatest, shame and defeat. That this mere, Indian woman, not even, a king, not even a large army, this mere Indian woman had actually stood up against the army. So what was at stake for the British, on the other hand, was to really talk about this woman as someone who was an anomaly. So the British had this very kind of 19th century warring impulse in the ways in which they depicted her. Some novels, reports, conversations talk about her as this worthy foe, right? Unlike all the other Indians. And this is, again, it's very contradictory because by setting her up as the worthy foe, what the British are doing is really pulling down Indian masculinity. To say that she was the only man on the other side is really to talk about Indian masculinity in a very derogatory way. On the other hand, you also had depictions where she's talked about as a very promiscuous, lascivious Indian woman who kept a harem full of British men, who was given to massacres, wanted to kill all the British women and children. So you see this warring impulse, right? It's not so much whether each side was telling the true story, but what was at stake in telling her story.